we're Student Business Services. If you ever need to find us, we're right here just next door in MSC 4300, which is the Student Government Suite. You go in the Student Government Suite, you take the first turn to your right, that's our office. We're pretty much there Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 5. So you're always welcome just to walk in the door. I can't promise I'm there every minute, but there's always someone there that should be able to help you if I'm not. And just a quick idea too. Our director, her name's Silade. You're always welcome to engage with her. My direct boss is Mapel. She's over purchasing and travel. And then if you think I did a good job, my name is Mike Steuben, and I'm responsible for sports clubs and student government. If I did a bad job, my name's Antonio Gonzalez. So, feel free to complain about me. But at any rate, no, in all seriousness, look, our office, our goal is to be your partner. So we want to help you through this process to make things go as smoothly as possible. And so with that in mind, what we're going to do here in this training is we're going to go ahead and sort of break down the stuff that you need to know. But then if you have questions beyond that, always feel free to reach out. For the people just coming in, there are some scattered ones throughout. You're probably, if you have like a backpack up covering a seat, pull it down because you're going to fill in all these seats here. So we're going to start off with the travel piece, and I just want to also mention that there's a student worker named Shay. She's probably the person that's going to email you more than I will on travel because quite honestly, she does all the hard work, and she should get all the credit for that. So she'll be a person heavily involved in getting your travel request processed. So the first thing I want to talk about is the idea of the deadline of when your travel packet has to be submitted. So we ask for it 10 business days in advance at a minimum. So 10 business days is basically 2 weeks, because you're going to count Monday to Fridays. You're not going to count the weekends. Technically, you shouldn't count days like Labor Day, Veterans Day, Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving. But I'll let you in on a secret. I haven't turned anyone away for not counting that day, so that's not going to kill you if you miss it. But try to if you can. And of course, by the way, always feel free to get your packets in early. Now, if you submit a packet 2 weeks in advance, what that's going to qualify you for is to have funded travel where there'll be reimbursement to the team and the opportunity for prepayment for registration, flights, and charter buses. Now, Campus Rec asks for 15 business days in advance to turn in your travel packets. By going that extra week, you're going to get 2 more important things given to you as an opportunity. One, the people in Campus Rec who are wonderful for doing this have taken on hotel prepayments to make your lives easier. So that's a huge thank you to them, but that part adds a little bit to the process. So you got to hit the 3 weeks for that, and then there's also a points factor as well. I'm like, yep, I'm getting the nod, so that sounds like a yes. That if you want to also earn the points you need to stay in good standing as a sports club, they also require that 3 weeks in advance. So shoot for 3 weeks or even more, and then if nothing else, just know it has to be in now 2 weeks in advance as an absolute last moment for that 10 business days. And by the way, days that we're not having class but the university is open still count as business days. For example, like after commencement in December up until they close the university around, let's say, the 22nd, 23rd, all those days still count as business days. Just because there's no class doesn't actually change that fact. Now, one thing I want to stress to you is the packet has to come in complete, which means all the needed signatures, all the needed pages. So a packet that's handed in half complete at that 10 business day mark isn't going to count, and quite frankly, you run the risk of having the travel rejected. So that's important to note. And one of the things that I just have to stress is the reason these deadlines exist is in order to have funded travel by university policy, we have to have something called a travel authorization in place. And there's parts of this that take some time, and so that's why that 2 week window is there, so that we can't just simply say, well, you were late, but we'll just go ahead and take care of you after the fact. We can't do that because if we don't have that travel authorization in place, we can't have any funding for any of that travel. So that's important to know. So this is just a quick look at the steps in the process. Obviously you want to start off by planning your trip. And I'm going to give you one idea that some sports clubs have done in the past that is really on top of things. In particular, the clubs that are part of leagues where your schedule's already set. Where you know your schedule for the year. And I know that doesn't apply to all of you because it just doesn't work that way. how awesome would it be to go ahead and type out those travel roster pages you need to get signed, take them to your first practice and have everyone sign them. Because you can always cross names off. You can always have extra signatures you don't need and get those all out of the way in advance. So that's just one thing to keep in mind, that if you really want to be on top of things and make your life easier as those deadlines approach throughout the year, get all those roster pages signed up front. At any rate, the second step obviously is to complete the application and get that into us. You're going to then go on your trip, have a good time, win. See, I'd normally say kick some ass here, but I'm being recorded, so I better say kick some butt. I guess that's out the window now. Now the window's open for me to swear the whole way. It's out, so.
We can make some edits over. I can censor things out.
Well, that's no fun. So after your competition, come back, bring us the receipts and the post-travel documents. We're going to require those within 3 business days of your trip. Afterwards, we're going to do up an expense report in our office, get it out to you via email. We're going to give you another 3 business days to get that signed and back to us. You're going to then get reimbursed, and then we're going to ask for the travelers to have the potential to acknowledge that they've been reimbursed and that money needs to be split up among team members. So that's just sort of a quick overview. We're going to get more into depth of those steps as we go here. So when you start your planning process, the first thing you want to think about is, how are you going to get to where the competition is? Now, one thing I want to start off with is, when we start talking about reimbursement for drivers and their mileage for cars, that's your option. You know, you have to sort of manage your budget to see, hey, do you really, for the people that just came in, there's a chair here. Are there any chairs in the back there, or are they all sort of gone? We got 2 chairs here. We want to get people in seats, yeah? So come on a little closer, get friendly. Someone can have this stool. I know we'll put it like way in the front to make it look like a dunce capel. We'll put it off to the side here. But anyway, so as we're talking about the mileage, you have the ability to get up to 44.5 cents a mile for any driver who drives their own personal cars. It must be their car. It can't just simply be a friend's car, a parent's car. This doesn't apply to rental cars either. We'll talk about rental cars in a minute. It also has to only be people who are on the roster competing in that week's competition for that travel. You can't have a coach drive, for example. The coaches aren't eligible for reimbursement. If you need to rent vehicles, you don't need something called additional driver form. We'll see that a little bit later on, but you're welcome to rent vehicles. So the USF policy says you're supposed to rent compact cars, but then beyond that, the exception to that is as needed for number of people going and amount of gear you need to transport. So obviously we don't need to put a rugby team in a compact car, but you need to basically say, start with the smallest possible vehicle that will accommodate your needs, is what that policy really boils down to. If you need vans, just a personal tip from doing this, there's a company called Carl's Rent-A-Vans, and they tend to have less stringent rules about age requirements to rent their vans, because that's an important factor when it comes to you guys, because not everyone's going to meet all the age requirements from the big national companies. And my Uncle Carl gives me $20 every time one of you rents. No, I'm not related. Even if there is a Carl, I don't know that. But yeah, nothing for me in that. But just, do tend to be a good one to use. Yeah, question?
Yeah, how much of the rental vehicle is reimbursed to you?
So the answer is pretty much the whole thing, as long as you say no to some important questions when they ask you when you're renting the vehicle.
That's including the gas?
Yeah, gas is included. So you gotta say no to the optional insurance. You gotta say no to anything that they try to add on, like a prepaid fuel plan, a GPS rental, a baby seat. Please don't bring babies. Stuff like that. So the optional add-on stuff, if you say no to all of it, and the insurance is a big one, by the way. Anything that's mandatory, we can reimburse. And we can reimburse the gas for the vans. We'll talk about the gas in a minute. And one thing too, by the way, there is one optional thing you can do that I can reimburse. If you have a significantly long drive, and for the purpose of this, let's say out of the state of Florida, or University of West Florida would count too, all the way out in Pensacola. You can add an additional driver to the van, and they'll maybe charge you a fee for that. We can reimburse that because that's a safety feature. You know, maybe not the safest thing to ask one person to drive to, you know, South Carolina all the way on their own, so having a second person switch off. If they hit you for a fee for that, we can reimburse it. So lodging. So, you know, you need to start thinking about how many rooms, you know, and you obviously got things to keep in mind as well, you know, in terms of if you have a co-ed team, you know, it shouldn't always be 2 guys, 2 girls share a room. Doesn't work. Nothing. I got nothing from that. It's gonna be a long time. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, but think about what makes the most sense in terms of the lodging. You know, because you got to sort of plan that out as well. And one of the things is, so look, your hotel rooms, and it's very rare this ever comes up, they really need to be under $200 a night. And I know that, and here's where that comes into play. It's not so much that you guys are staying at the Ritz-Carlton. I see your reports. You guys stay at the Motel 6, 5, 4, and 3, but never anything above a Super 8. You know, I don't ever see any 9s on there. At any rate, but here's what you got to keep in mind. Sometimes you're going to a big city where there's a big event. You know, if you're a team and you're competing in New Orleans and it's Mardi Gras, well, first of all, good work on the scheduling. But putting that aside, edit that out too, Antonio, please. But on top of that, hotel rooms are gonna be crazy expensive. So if you get to a situation where rooms are gonna be over $200, you gotta let us know so that we can see if we can prepare a justification for central travel, which is like an Expedia search that shows that all the rooms are expensive, but we gotta do it in advance of the trip. We can't do it after you get back. So for the most part, keep in mind, rooms under $200 a night per room, but if it's gonna be more than that, because you're maybe in the city the Super Bowl's in, for example, you know, there's something like that. Let us know so we can get all our paperwork done before you go. It's greatly helpful. When you do your application, if you share with us where you wanna stay, there's a spot on the application to share that. You can give us screenshots. If you're asking for prepayment, we're gonna share that with Campus Rec. I'm gonna let Antonio say a quick word or two, if you want to, about how Campus Rec does the prepayment, so that if anyone who doesn't know gets a feel for that.
So real quick on that, so once more, so this year we talked about how the funded travel process is gonna go straight through Mike's office. So that means the form that you fill out there is the form that we're gonna receive. So if you put that you wanna stay at a certain hotel, what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at that hotel. We're gonna be the double check, so Mike's office is usually the first one, they look at the prices. We're gonna be that second layer of security to make sure that we're not staying above that $200 limit, or if we are, we're at least prepared as to why we need to create justification for that. Along with that, what happens is once we receive the form, our office goes ahead and secures that room of wherever you're trying to stay at. One of our staff, GAs or one of the supervisors will reach out to you if there's an issue with one of the places that you've also made. We also may just reach out to you and say, hey, there's a comparable hotel for significantly cheaper. We do a quick search of the area. If you are staying at one hotel for whatever reason it is, we're good with it. We just may reach out to you to say, hey, you all can save X amount of dollars if you do this. It's a comparable hotel. We're not gonna try to downgrade you. Like Mike said, we're not trying to put you, you know, in just the Roach Motel off the side of the highway. But we may just take a look in that quick area and see what's going on. From that standpoint, do you want me to just talk about if they put in their name first, they just reserve the rooms?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so with that, if you are concerned, like let's say it's a big tournament and you know you're going and the rooms are gonna go fast, you can always reserve the room in your name and temporarily place someone's credit card down as a whole. For the most part, most hotels don't charge until usually 48 hours beforehand. You rent.
It varies, but usually it's not instant.
Yep. So with that being said, if you reach out to us and say, hey, I have 5 rooms under Antonio Gonzalez and I want to put it under Mike Steuben, or we're going to transfer it over, it's in my name, and Mike Steuben's going to put it on his card for the university. What we'll do is we'll reach out to the hotel, we'll say, hey, yep, here's the reservation, you're going to send us all that information, and we'll transfer everything over so that we have it in our name. We will also send you, once we've committed this and we have everything, all the prepayments done, we will send you a confirmation saying that they have the credit card authorization on file, because I can't tell you how many times they lose that and they go to the club, we don't have this information. So we'll send you a copy of it, and we will also let you know, here is the complete confirmation for everything. So you will receive that from our office staff, and The only thing that we ask from you on your side is when you check out, get a receipt. Make sure you get a receipt. If it's in the state of Florida, I don't know if I'm jumping too far ahead, but if it's in the state of Florida, make sure there are no taxes. You are tax exempt, and we'll give all that information, and we'll send that to all the officers of the club that are traveling. Just make sure that we have that information on hand.
I'm gonna jump in there. The tax exempt, by the way, is just when we use USF funds. If you guys are paying for the room and gonna get reimbursed, and maybe you didn't meet the 15-day deadline for prepayment for lodging, you're not tax exempt. I don't think any club has taken that effort. It's not, probably not worth it. It really isn't. So just know that the tax exempt is USF money. So when we say that, we're talking about that. And I'm gonna do one more quick thing since we talk about tax exempt. When booking a hotel and you want USF to prepay, we can't use a third party, somebody Expedia, Travelocity, because they don't help with the tax exempt. We gotta go to the hotel directly. So just know that if you do one of those reservations where you hold a room, don't hold it on Expedia, hold it right with the hotel itself.
Yeah, if you have any questions about that, especially if you've got your stuff 20 days ahead of time and you know you're gonna ask for prepayment, you can always call our office too, and we'll make sure that we get everything set up and squared away with you to make sure that everything is good for that process. But yeah, that's very important. Third-party websites, try to avoid them as much as possible. Honestly, they usually don't give you the best rates. Sometimes they give you a little bit better, but for the most part, try to work with those hotels directly if you're trying to reserve that space with the hotels. And then also with us, just make sure that you're giving us that information so we can properly transfer everything over to our name so that whoever's traveling doesn't get their credit card charged for $1,500 for club travel. We don't want that to happen.
There's one more quick thing since we're talking about all these lodging pieces. There was a stretch of time last year where the governor made Airbnb impermissible to use for any funded state travel, which would include all the sports club travel. That has been lifted. So you're welcome to go back to using Airbnb. That's perfectly fine. One little catch to this for Airbnb though, is it cannot be prepaid. It has to be a traditional hotel if you want prepayment. But if you, like an Airbnb makes the most sense for your team and for the most economical, and you're willing to front the money, by all means, we can reimburse it on the back end. There was a question over here. Yes?
Yeah, so the reimbursements, does that come from our club's budget or is that like a separate thing?
Well, it comes from your club's A&S allocation from the student government via the Sports Club Council. So if that's what you mean by budget, then yes, it absolutely does. So basically that allocation that your club has, you need to sort of keep in mind and budget it out for the course of the year. And to do things that, so that you can cover what you need to cover both on the equipment side, possibly the coaching side, and then as well the travel side. And that's, by the way, I by no means, I started to say this before, but one of the things a lot of sports clubs will do is, if you ever do the math on that 44.5 cents a mile for personal cars, it's actually quite lucrative. I would love a career just driving sports clubs around and pocketing that money. It's really a good deal. And you're welcome to take every penny of it. There's no means, I'm never gonna say like you can't do that, but sometimes sports clubs will say to me, hey look, that trip to Gainesville, we're gonna just cap it at 100 miles round trip for each of our drivers. That's $44.50 each. That covers the gas to Gainesville and back, or whatever the case may be. That's an option sports clubs have if you're worried about your budget being able to cover all your needs for the year, is that you can cap down parts of travel and not take every penny back. And the driving is the easiest way to do that because it's the one thing where the money there is a little bit more than probably the true costs. Okay, jumping down to registration. Keep in mind deadlines. Be sure to share deadlines with us if you want prepayment forms. We make sure we hit them. There's for some sports, there's also deadlines or the registration amounts are tiered, so that the earlier out you register, the cheaper the registration. It's not mandatory, but it makes a lot of sense to get your request in early so we can hit those early, less expensive registrations. Because once again, if we save money at one part, that's gonna be more money for the club to do something else or do more with as the year goes on. One bit of good news for the registrations for prepayment, I can do Venmo and PayPal, because I know a lot of the clubs were paying that way, and that's totally fine. But with one catch, let me say, is you need to double and triple check those accounts that I'm sending the money to. There was like 2 times last year where I Venmo'd like the wrong person money because there was a typo on the request form. And we got very lucky that wrong person gave us our money back twice. Two different wrong people, by the way. I didn't make the same, I wasn't keep paying the same person, but, you know, cause like with stuff like that, there's a lot of things where like, for example, if it's like a common name like Mike 12, well, if it's really supposed to be Mike 13, there probably is a Mike 12 also. So, you know, you gotta keep your eye out for that. Because at the end of the day, if we ever send Venmo or PayPal to the wrong account and can't recover it, and the mistake was yours, the club's gonna have to reimburse that money back to the account. If the mistake is mine, then I'm gonna probably doctor up the paperwork to make it look like it was something, no, I'm just kidding. If it was mine, then I'm gonna have to be responsible for that. Question? Or stretching? Yeah, get the stretching out. Stay awake, that's good. Okay, so, the application, you have to type the whole thing except signatures. Every box on there, every piece of it is typed except the parts where people sign. The signatures, by the way, have to be actual pen to paper, not electronic. Now that doesn't mean you can't use technology where you email someone the form, they print it off, sign it, scan it, email it back. That's perfectly fine. But ultimately, for each person, it has to be a pen to paper. Reminder on here that you gotta have the application incomplete and turned in one moment, the whole thing. So this bottom line doesn't happen a lot, but I wanna mention this. So this is primarily for clubs that don't have like a registration cost because their team, for example, they pay like a league dues that covers their game fees. If the only expense you have for a trip is just simply mileage for people driving their own cars, whoever's the lead traveler must also drive. And the reason for that is because mileage is the one thing where the individual drivers get their own checks and their own payment. And it's not possible to have a trip where the lead traveler has a blanket zero expense sheet. So like for example, if you're going somewhere close, like to beat up UCF, just down the road, and you're gonna go in the morning, come back in the evening after destroying them like 42-0, because they're awful, and they're evil, and they're mean people. If that's the case, then if all you're gonna ask for is mileage for people driving their own cars, whoever's the lead traveler must be one of the drivers. It doesn't happen a lot, but it becomes a big issue if not. Yes?
What if we don't have a lead traveler?
Well, you have to. If you want a funded travel, the team has to designate someone as a lead traveler. There's no requirement, it just has to be anyone on the roster can be lead traveler. They just have to come here and hear these witty jokes, or the recorded version, and that's what qualifies them. That plus the fact that they're in good standing on the roster. Another question, yeah.
So kind of going back to like the driver application form.
Yes.
So you said, you know, if we rent like a van or whatever, we can have two drivers for safety reasons. Is that still true for a private car, two drivers for a private car, even if one driver, say a friend, is not the owner of the car?
Yeah, so what's gonna happen here is, let's say you're driving your car, and at this point, and you've got, you know, 3 teammates in the car and you're going somewhere. If it's you and your car, it doesn't matter who switches off and drives. We don't care, we don't need to know. The only key is that whoever's gonna claim that mileage is the owner of the car and is on the roster. Those are the things that have to be true. But if you're willing to let your friends drive your car, you know, by all means, no issues there.
From a risk, and this is not financial anything. From a risk management standpoint, anybody that is driving, you as the officers are responsible for 2 things. One, making sure that they actually are eligible to be a licensed driver. And people joke, but I mean, it happens. People don't pay their insurance in the state of Florida. If you don't pay insurance, your driver's license gets revoked. Okay? The second piece is that you should make sure that they have insurance. Okay? If you are putting them responsible for driving anybody, now rental cars, they make sure that information is up front, but if you talk about driving personal vehicles, that then becomes you as the officer's responsibility to make sure this is a risk management piece that you are doing that. So I just want to make sure that everyone's. So then, yes, all right. Don't get too far off. We can talk about this risk management stuff later. Risk management stuff?
Yeah.
Later on. Back to financial.
Do you have a question?
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering, does that apply to if somebody just decides to drive themselves, like alone, or?
Once more, you as officers are responsible for all the members on the travel. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So this is the application page with one small exception. So this lovely travel PowerPoint piece was put together Friday around 4 p.m. And so this slide is from last year, so it has the 18-19 year on it. we barely changed anything in the application. So if you were around last year and did them last year, they're gonna look very familiar to you. With the exception, they're gonna say 2019-20 on the top. So if you have the old one like saved on a hard drive, go get the new one, use the new one. That's the important thing I wanna mention there. But you're just gonna fill out information about the tournament, about the lead traveler. It's very important, by the way, for the lead traveler information, that you put down the address where you'd like, if you're gonna get a check in the mail, where you'd like that check sent to. So if you, for example, put down your home permanent address in Arizona, where mom and dad is, that check's gonna get sent to Arizona. Nothing we can do about it. No, that's fine, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying that's gonna slow up you getting the money. So think about what address you wanna put down, and also, by the way, you may wanna reach out to our office if you have travel that's ending, like say, in December, right before you go home for a month. You may very well wanna put down your home address in Arizona in that example. You have to estimate your travel expenses. This is, every expense for the trip gets put in here, not just what you want prepayment. So everything that you expect to either get prepayment or reimbursed, put it in here, give us your best estimate. Give us some information about the lodging you plan to use. Give us, there's going to be a notes area to give us any question, any notes you want to have, any directions, share it with us. You know, this is a great place to type out, for example, if you want me to Venmo someone for registration, give me all the details there. Double and triple check the name we're going to send the money to. Can definitely go right there. Also, there's yes, no questions if you request prepayment. Please don't leave those blank. Let us know, hey, we want prepayment for registration, or no, we don't want it. Either answer is fine, but you gotta let us know. Oh, by the way too, if anyone has a job at USF and you get a direct deposit paycheck, your reimbursement for travel will come via direct deposit. And I should mention this too now, just so we're clear, the lead traveler gets the full direct deposit reimbursement for the entire trip and has to distribute the money to their other team members. With the exception of additional drivers driving their own cars, they get their own checks. So, this is the next page, which is the travel roster. Type in the information, their email, their U number, their birth date, gotta be signed in pen. I wanna stress two things. First off, you can't just simply create signature pages and have people sign that isn't this full page. Because when someone signs this, they're agreeing to those 7 terms up there. As good, responsible people, you should give them a chance to read those terms they just agreed to, because you wouldn't want to sign a contract and not know what you just signed. So that, don't pass this around and practice in a manner that people don't get a chance to read it when you're just pushing them to sign it. Let them see what they're signing. You can use more than one page. You can have people on here that don't travel that we cross off. That's all perfectly fine. So you can do this form up and get it all done up for multiple trips. And if you have people that, someone drops off the team, you don't have to start over. You can just cross them off. There's no harm at all. But it has to be a new, fresh form for every trip. Meaning if you're going to 5 road games, you got to get people to sign 5 different forms, not just one form and make 4 copies of it. And in part, you've got to fill out that top part before their signatures, which includes exactly which travel it's for. Now, I hate to even say this, but I've got to. It feels like we average 1 time a year, we catch an instance where this is all forged. And I hate to even think that, I'm not very smart, so that probably means it's probably happening a lot more than I'm not catching. Understand that this is works as a contract. Forgery is a really big deal. Don't sign for people who aren't there. You can absolutely email them the form. You can also use, if you have 20 people going and you have to do 20 separate forms, so each person signs 1 piece of paper and you turn in 20 pages, it's perfectly fine. That's not even the slightest of an issue. If there is forgery, there's going to be a series of penalties that I'm going to levy against you all that I can do. Stuff like no prepayment, making you turn in your applications maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks in advance for all travel for the next like 2 or 3 years. I mean, I'm gonna hit you as hard as I can, quite honestly, because it is a big deal. I'm also gonna turn over the people involved with students' rights and responsibilities, and I'm gonna ask the sports club office and the sports club council to hit you with everything they can as well. So, in all seriousness, don't do it. You know, you can use electronics to get this form to whoever you need to via email so they can sign if they're nowhere nearby. But don't just start signing names because someone's not available to sign up the day you have the form handy. Question?
For any reason you have to rescan or the signature ends up being a scan of because of doing it over email, is that okay?
Yeah,
As long as
absolutely,
it's
yes.
a scanned
Yeah,
signature?
as
Okay.
long as at some point a pen touch paper scans,
Okay.
good clear images.
And it can be its own sheet if someone's away.
Yep,
I
absolutely.
can fax it to them, they can print
Yep,
it. Okay.
Yep, you can split people off into as many sheets as you need to
Okay.
make it convenient, because if you have to send it off to 5 people, you're gonna probably not wanna wait for one to return and, move it around.
Yep.
So just send it off to the 5 people and we can get 5 sheets back with 1 signature each. That's not a worry, never a worry.
I will also put this out there to assist Mike with this and to assist all of you. We have a massive office now. The sport club office was a plaza before. It is now a mansion. It's still in the basement. Can't move up too far. But if you need to leave paperwork with us to assist you, right, so you're not running across campus to 14 different people and you want to leave a travel roster for people to sign in the office, that is fine. Reach out to myself, reach out to Dan, reach out to your program supervisor, and we will hold that on file. We can make sure that our office staff knows, or the supervisors in the building know, that if someone is coming in there, we will have this paper on file for you all. So we will assist you. The one thing you cannot do not sign somebody else's name. As Mike mentioned, sometimes that'll get, maybe we'll look through the cracks. We now have our staff, once more, doubling up on everything that Mike's staff is doing. So that is another essentially 2 to 4 sets of eyes on this. Please make sure that you are doing everything the way that we're telling you to.
This is the additional driver form. So basically, we just need some information for the people who are gonna drive their personal vehicle that wish to get reimbursed with your allocation. So a couple things to point out. There's no harm in giving me extra ones of these for people you're not sure are gonna drive and they end up not driving. We can just simply cancel it. What we can't do is the reverse. We can't go back after the fact and add one in for someone that you didn't give us a form for. They're due at least 2 weeks or 10 business days before the trip. At that 10 business days out, we need to have all the paperwork sort of in a final status. Like, for example, if you turn it in 3 weeks out and all of a sudden your lead traveler has to change, if you get the new one before the 2-week mark or the 10-day mark, we can make that change. We'll also work with you to make a change for a lead traveler or an additional driver later on if it's a situation that is 100% out of your control. And what I'm talking about there is the unfortunate stuff like the death in the family, someone has to miss a trip, someone gets injured and can't compete, and was gonna be on the trip, but now they can't go, stuff like that. Not my boss called and I gotta work a double on Saturday so I can't do the trip. That won't be, a reason we redo it, but I do wanna let you know that we're there to help you so that if you get in that situation, just talk to us. But the key is you gotta talk to us before the trip. Because once the trip happens, there's very little we can do or very little wiggle room we have to make exceptions. Bless you. So the additional driver form only applies when someone on the roster is driving their own personal car and wishes to get reimbursed. You do not need to do these for rental cars. You don't need to do these for coaches. You don't need to do these for other family members who are loaning you their car to take on the trip. This has got to be a member of the team who's not the lead traveler driving their personal vehicle can get reimbursed. Up to 44.5 cents a mile, but you're welcome to cap it at less miles. And for the miles, by the way, in case you're curious, they always start at USF Tampa and they always end at the destination of the tournament. We don't give you the back and forth, like say from your hotel to the tournament or out to dinner or stuff like that. But that's minor in the bigger picture. Once again, make sure we got a correct up-to-date address because this is where the check's gonna go. The driver and the financial officer cannot be the same. By the way, there's a blank here to sign for a financial officer. So I hate that terminology because it's not the financial officer that we're about to talk about in the next part of purchasing training. In reality, that's any officer who's not the person signing over here. So basically it just requires a second person signing off in terms of the travel forms. So you go to the game, you win, and while you're there, probably not in the middle of play, but like right before or right after, you get this form signed. This is something saying that, confirming that you're there and competing at the tournament, the game, the event, whatever. So you gotta get someone from the hosting organization. They can handwrite all of this. No need to type this part in here, but the top part up top should be typed before you get there. So that the parts in yellow, all those yellow boxes are typed before you get there, and then you handwrite this. Oh, you know what? We put the entry fee part in as a typed box, but that one you may not know until you're there, and that's fine if you don't. That part can be handwritten, but it has the option to type on those boxes there. Okay, so during travel, save your receipts. We're gonna need them. For hotels, you need something called a zero balance receipt. That's when you check out, they basically say, you don't owe the hotel anything. You know, it shows that, you know, it's all good. By the way, it shouldn't be needed to be said, but I'm just gonna say it quickly. We can't reimburse for the gift shop, the restaurant, in-room movies, in-room bad movies. The only thing that pretty much you can put onto your bill and will reimburse for is parking if you've got a vehicle officially on the trip. And the parking, by the way, you have to use the least expensive, which in most cases is a self-park, but some hotels in those big cities, they only have valet. If they only have valet, that's perfectly fine. There's no rule against it, but it's just as long as it's the most economical. So I'm going to mention it here, and it's going to apply to rental cars too. Every name on every receipt has to be someone on the travel roster. Rooms can't be in coaches' names, family members' names, can't be put in other people's names. And in particular, this is the big one for this year that we had, this actually is not a new rule, but it didn't get enforced. Rental vehicles must be under the name of someone on the travel roster. No exceptions to that. If it's not in someone's name, bless you, then it can't be reimbursed. And that's a USF policy, by the way. That's not our office policy. We've been sort of skirting that line and writing up explanations that we really shouldn't to get some of those paid in the past. If you rent, we can reimburse gas for the rental vehicles. Now, it's important to note, we absolutely need the gas receipt. If you pay with a credit card or a debit card at the pump, the receipt that prints out is always cool. That's good. If you want to pay with cash, if you go in and prepay, you know, which is the requirement at gas stations, most places, you give them the cash before you pump, they may give you a receipt that just shows how much cash you just gave them. That's not the receipt we need. We need a receipt after you pump the gas that reflects how many gallons you pumped and how much was spent. Because if you give the cashier a $50 bill, bless you, or you just react to the fact that you don't have a $50 bill usually on you, it could be either. But if you give the cashier a $50 bill, but then you only pump $32 worth of gas, that receipt for $50 won't work. It's gotta be the one after you pump that says you pumped X number of gallons at this cost per gallon equals this much money. We need those receipts within 3 business days. You're always welcome to walk them in the door to us. This is the lead traveler's responsibility. You can scan them as well. We are getting away from images that are just cell phone photos. If, by the way, your receipt was an email, like maybe you booked the hotel and they emailed you a receipt, just forward us the email. That's always perfectly fine. You'll see there's a question later on that you've got to include the last 4 digits of the credit cards used. And this is because this whole travel system is geared towards USF employees more so, and they don't want us to, like, say, for example, use our university credit card and then claim reimbursement. I get the fact that you all don't have university credit cards, but they don't make an exception for that rule for us, so we all have to put down the 4 digits for the credit card used. So then you gotta give us the post-travel summary. So you gotta tell us what the actual expenses were. Now, here's a big one. Please do not leave off prepaid expenses. This is not just what you want reimbursed. This is every expense from the trip. It's all gotta be on there. The last 4 digits of the credit card number is a field there. If you pay with cash, that's fine. If they take a check, that's fine. You know, there's no issue with that, but just let us know. You won't necessarily know the 4 digits of the credit card from the USF credit cards, like if I pay or Antonio pays, that's fine to leave those off as well. But if someone from your travel roster paid for an expense, gotta have those credit card digits on there. For the mileage, tell us how many miles you wanna give everyone. This is where you tell us if you wanna cap the mileage. If you wanna give everyone 100 miles round trip instead of the 240, by putting 100 in here, everyone gets 100 miles. Everyone has to get the same mileage that's getting reimbursed. We can't give like the person who scored 2 goals 200 miles and the person that didn't score less. So if people drove their own personal car expecting reimbursement, everyone's got to be equal. Then there's a box down here, list of travelers that were on the roster that did not travel. So if you crossed them out before you submitted, you don't have to tell us. But if anyone wasn't crossed out on that roster and then all of a sudden they didn't go, got to put their names here because they can't have expenses in their names if they didn't travel. There's an additional comment box, and you can also break down if other people are due back reimbursements. So we're going to do some work on our end and email out the lead traveler an expense report to review and sign. It's your responsibility to review this and make sure it's accurate, because if it's not accurate, you've got to tell us before you sign it, or don't sign it and don't return it, because this is our last chance to make updates to your expenses, reimbursement for your trip. We ask for it in 3 business days. You can't use electronic signatures again. It's got to be a pen to paper. You can walk in our door, you can email it back to us. I want to point out this fact. These steps after travel, the 3 days, business days, these are all business days, so we're not counting the weekends. The 3 business days for receipts, the 3 business days to sign these forms. The quicker you do these, the quicker you're gonna get money back if you're owed money. So it's in your best interest to do them right away. You know, but 3 is the limit. This is a group travel reimbursement form. This is just simply if people chipped in and are owed part of the money back because you told us on your post-travel, we're going to send this out to the lead traveler and ask them to acknowledge it with their signature that other people are due back money, the check or the money they're going to get. So it's just a extra mechanism to basically say, hey, this money isn't all mine, it really belongs to some of my teammates. When the lead traveler gets paid, they have 30 days to spread out any reimbursements to their teammates that are owed them. I mean, hopefully you're going to do it sooner than 30 days, but 30 days is your deadline for that. This is a look at what the expense report is. So you just got to sign it with a pen, get it back to us in 3 business days. I already mentioned it. Oh, one thing that's important with these. Almost always, these are multiple pages. The very bottom of like page 1 of 1, 1 of 2, 1 of 3. Sometimes those second and third pages are even blank. So it's a USF requirement you return all the pages to us, not just the page you signed. Because it's sort of what your signature is sort of saying, hey, I'm agreeing to all these pages. So if you don't send back what you're agreeing to, we don't know if you edited the page. Like, you know, well, I crossed this number off and wrote in $1 million. Well, don't do that. But otherwise, you got to send them all back. So 4 to 6 weeks later. Now, I'm going to be honest. It's really weird. There are times when we'll turn this thing over for you know, the auditors, and they're on a roll, and sometimes we'll get the approval in a day or 2, and there are times that it's pulling teeth. But they say that 4 to 6 weeks is the time frame you should get paid, because it's a whole other office has to review the work that we do to make sure that we are guiding you through a process where USF rules and policies are being followed. So the reimbursement I already mentioned is going to be a check to the lead traveler. Additional drivers will get their own check. If you happen to be a USF employee, it'll come direct deposit. Checks can't be picked up. We don't generate them, they never come through our office's hands. The only exception to that is they get returned in the mail sometimes, like because of a bad address. We can arrange a pickup of that second time around, but never on the first time. Everything else I've mentioned on here. Can you travel a little bit early to take in maybe some practice or be a tourist and do some sightseeing? You know, it's Mardi Gras, for example. Well, I'm probably giving a bad example there. Yeah, if there's a yoga place to get in one with yourself next door, forget about the Mardi Gras. But anyway, yeah, you can do that. But you gotta let us know in advance so we can do something called a price comparison. So what it basically happens here is the reimbursable part starts one day before your competition and ends one day after your competition ends. And then anything that you do outside of that is you're welcome to do if you let us know in advance so we can do what we need to do to prepare it and do up the documents. Now, one thing too is sometimes you're in tournaments where you don't know how long you're gonna be staying because, you know, for example, you got to win to play the next day, and then you win again, you play the next day, and keep going. It's perfectly fine to book through the end of the championship game, and it's perfectly fine to stay through the championship game and even come back the day after. You can plan to win. That's totally cool. And if you don't win, you don't have to necessarily change your plans. Okay, so I want to just mention the big changes from this year. Because remember I told you I made this at 4 o'clock on Friday, so this is the handiwork of that. We got too many images that you just couldn't read because, I mean, it's like the old thing line of like my dog ate my homework. Well, a lot of dogs get a lot of travel receipts last year. And a lot of that's the idea of someone like taking a photo where they're like holding out the window at 50 miles per hour and it's flapping in the breeze. So look, we want to get a scan, a PDF version of receipts and signatures. That's important because we have to be able to provide documentation to an auditor. We can't just take it on your word and the receipt's that documentation. All expenses for the trip have to be a name of a traveler on the roster. And the big one here is rental vehicles. Quite frankly, you got two choices if you can't come up with someone who's willing to drive, who can meet the requirements to rent a vehicle, which is usually a certain age requirement and having a credit card in their name. And that is, do it with your own funds and don't ask for reimbursement, or get something, a method of transportation that you can do, which is driving your own cars, or a charter bus, or plane tickets. But the one thing that we're not gonna do is we're not gonna do justifications for rental vehicles in like a former player's name, a coach's name, a family member's name. They've gotta be in the name of a traveler on the roster. Gotta have the forms all complete by those deadlines. So 10 business days is your absolute last deadline before a trip. It can't just be, you bring us in the forms and there's like, 18 signatures missing. They gotta be done. And then, this was in place last year, and honestly, I didn't check it. Travel train's gonna be mandatory to be a lead traveler, which you're covering here, so you're all good. And hopefully we're gonna have an online version for people that can't be here or become a lead traveler as the year goes on, because any traveler on your roster can be the lead traveler. There's no requirement. Oh, one more quick thing. I see this from time to time. Sometimes people think because someone's the lead traveler, they don't have to be on the roster page too. By all means, that lead traveler has to be on that roster page and sign it again. So, at any rate, this is the end of the travel piece. If you have questions, you can reach out to us. We have this group travel inbox, which is the best way because that way myself and Shay check it, and then there's a lady named Vanessa who does other parts of travel in our office that sort of becomes my backup, and she'll jump in and help. So that's the best way to reach us. But thank you very much for your time for travel. Oh, no, don't clap. Don't. The funny stuff's coming later. I promise you the jokes get better.